Hello and welcome to Newsclick. Today we have with us Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, well-known economic journalist. Paranjoy, you've done this recent story on the CAG draft report on Bhartis. Now, of course, first issue is how is it that the CAG, which is supposed to really audit government, why is it auditing private companies? It did it earlier in the case of Reliance, and this time it's done it for a leading telecom company. So why is it extending its purview?
That's correct. So this is the most obvious question that you could ask. Here is a body, a constitutional authority, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, which is mandated to oversee whether public finances have been utilized or not. What happened is on the 14th of April 2014, there was a landmark judgment of the Supreme Court of India which said, yes, the CAG has the right to audit the receipts, examine the receipts of private telecom companies. Why? Because the government is supposed to get a share of these receipts by way of license fee, by way of spectrum usage charges, and though the private telecom operators opposed the CAG audit tooth and nail through the Cellular Operators Association of India, eventually the Supreme Court ruled that yes, there is public money involved, and if these private telecom companies, if they do not account for their revenues properly, gross revenue, and a very contentious issue is what is called an adjusted gross revenue, then at the end of the day, the Exchequer, the public, the people of India, they lose. So this is money which is supposed to come to the government through the Department of Telecommunications, and therefore, since public money is involved, since public funds are involved, what the Supreme Court clearly said, but this audit would not be what is called a statutory audit, but an examination of receipts to ascertain whether the government of India, the union government, was getting its due share of revenue from these private telecom companies by way of license fee and spectrum usage charges.
It's interesting that you raised the issue that one of the reasons why they're open to audit is because they went to a revenue sharing model. And if you remember, that was in fact the Delhi Science Forum case in which I was involved, that essentially it was originally license fees as flat fees which they had to pay. They fought and got it into revenue share, and therefore they've opened themselves now into a statutory audit. That's really the issue.
Between 1999 and 2004, what had happened, you had when you had this kind of license fee regime that was taking place, and you had the transition in, to be very specific, in August 1999. There was a huge controversy. You remember the then Minister Telecommunications, Mr. Jagmohan, he had to put in his papers. He was literally forced to put in his papers. He had to leave kicking and screaming. There were all kinds of views, because what had happened earlier, if we go back in time, before 1996, when Pandit Sukram was the telecom minister, he was telecom minister between January 1993 and May 1996, and this was long before he was raided by the CBI, and the CBI found so much money in his house that it made it to the Guinness Book of World Records. Later on, Pandit Sukram was arrested. But what had happened essentially was that it was a very, very flawed and I would say a scandalous system of tendering for licenses, where in a sense companies were virtually encouraged to bid big. And so the government would say, look, we're going to get so much revenue. But everybody knew, including the telecom companies and the government, that this money would never come. So eventually, they never paid.
So effectively, it was getting licenses on wrong pretenses.
Absolutely correct.
Now, you have also argued that the two parts to what has happened, which makes Bharti such a, what shall we say, exemplar in business. They have been one of the highest risers.
It's an amazing company. I mean, the flagship company alone in the financial year that ended on the 31st of March 2015 had a revenue of 92,000 crores plus. I mean, it is one of the most profitable companies. It is one of the most glamorous corporate entities in the country. Mr. Sunil Bharti Mittal is a kind of iconic figure as a first generation entrepreneur. And mind you, it's not just India's biggest telecom operator. It is the world's fourth largest telecom operator. Today, Bharti, its activities, its subscribers are spread across 20 countries, across the Asian continent as well as the African continent. And why are they the fourth largest? They're fourth largest in terms of subscribers. They claim that at the end of March, they had 325 million subscribers. So it's a huge company we are talking about.
Now, you've argued that the CAG report, the draft report, talks about two basic issues that are there with the kind of, shall we say, imaginative accounting that a lot of the Indian corporates do, including
creative
Bharti.
accounting.
Creative accounting with the Bharti.
Plain and simple, let's use plain language, is financial fudge.
Yeah.
It's just they are fudging the figures.
Fudging the figures. There are two kinds of fudges that you have registered in the CAG draft report. One is the not paying the revenue share by underreporting what their gross revenue is, adjusted gross revenue, the AGR as you talk about, that basically what revenue they got if they fudge that, then the share of the government gets less if they show less revenue. This is one. And the second that you have argued about is the restructuring of the companies they hold in a way that they gain, the shareholders such as Bharti gain, other shareholders apparently lose. Are these the two major elements of the quote unquote creative accounting or creative fudges?
Absolutely correct. There are two elements of the fudge. One is what you can say under-reporting of revenues. So when you under-report revenues, you then pay less money to the government through license fee and spectrum usage charges. Now, how was this done? The figure that the CAG arrives at is in the region of about 14,500 crores, and it comes under a number of heads, and it's a kind of a detailed and a very, very meticulous kind of a calculation where under 23 specific heads they say how this company and its subsidiary Bharti Hexacom, they systematically underreported revenues. Why? Underreporting of prepaid revenue, short payment or non-payment of the license fee and the spectrum usage charge on postpaid revenue, then non-consideration of revenue from infrastructure sharing, non-payment of license fee and spectrum usage charge on roaming revenue, so it goes on. I mean, non-consideration of interest income, interest-free loans to subsidiaries. So there are a host of these under 23 different heads, including foreign exchange transactions, including showing that you are providing what is called PSTN, public switch telephone network services on which you're claiming a deduction, whereas you are actually using leased line. So there were a series of accounting fudges that took place, all of which indicates that and mind you, this is only a 4-year period, and this period happened 5 years ago. This is the period of the financial year 2006-07 to 2009-10. This is the UPA government, UPA 1, UPA 2. We are not even talking about what has happened over the 5 years subsequently, but just during this 4-year period, these are the figures that the CAG has come to.
CAG has also identified that they did not pay spectrum charges.
All right.
Of additional spectrum they had.
That's correct. That's right. So these are under various, as I said, there are 23 different heads. So not only that, they were given efficient spectrum, and they were given spectrum on occasions free or at well below the rates that were at which they were given. So it's interesting that here is a company that remained unscathed and was conspicuous by its absence when the 2G scam was being talked about. But today, some years later, we have come across. But let me answer the question that you raised. And this is something which is very, very interesting, because in this particular instance, where corporate restructuring not only resulted in the underreporting of revenues which are to be shared with the government, you can indicate that it actually also deprived the shareholders of Bharti Airtel, of of what they could have got by way of dividends, etc. See, essentially what happened is they underwent through a maze, and this is what the CAG report points out. It's literally a maze of transfers of assets. And there were about 4 companies involved. You had Bharti Airtel, the flagship. You had 2 of its subsidiaries, Bharti Infratel and Bharti Infratel Ventures. And you had another company with which other telecom operators, including the rivals of Bharti, and this is Indus Towers. It's an infrastructure sharing thing. All of them were involved. And it shows that you actually violated not only India's generally accepted accounting principles, Bharti's own auditors pointed this out. But that's all it did. It just pointed out that the manner in which these transfers of assets and these complex cross, within the subsidiaries, the change in assets went against India's generally accepted accounting standards. And if you add it all up, it comes to, as per the revaluation of investments in this 4-year period on 10 specific transactions, the total gain to Bharti was about 11,000 crores, and as per the market value of the shares received, it was about 33,000 crores. So the total amount coming to over 44,000 crores. And this, in a sense, is the indirect loss to the shareholders of Bharti as well as to the government by way of a lower, by artificially suppressing the adjusted gross revenue, what the government, the Department of Telecommunications should have got by way of license fees and spectrum usage charges.
And also would have been lost to income tax department because you
Absolutely.
didn't show the appreciation, yes, which would be actually income.
On this point, I need to add that the income tax department has indeed issued a show cause notice to the company, and I am not aware of at what stage this what kind of answer the company has given, but I can merely quote newspaper reports. There was an article that appeared in the Economic Times on the 29th of January 2014 quoting unnamed officials, where they said they could have transferred these assets directly to, say, Indus Towers instead of forming new companies. So it was also non-payment or alleged non-payment of tax, and if they were valued in the way it did, the value of the assets of the company would go up. So this, according to this newspaper report, facts were misrepresented not only to the income tax department but also to the Delhi High Court to obtain approval for merger, demergers with Indus Towers. And the income tax department's notice, according to the newspaper report, say that the assessee company Bharti Airtel has not disclosed the full and true intention in the scheme of arrangement approved by the High Court. I want to make one point. I think this CAG report, and this is a report which is being prepared. The version of the report that I have was finalized on the 31st, or on the last day of May, and in bits and pieces this report was sent to the Department of Telecommunications between April and May 2015. But as we talk, the Department of Telecommunications has not responded. Were they sleeping on the job?
These are the internal auditors of DOT, and they are quite a powerful body. So the fact that they did not react to the creative accounting or the accounting fudges of Bharti means that they were not protecting DOT's revenue. So essentially DOT is culpable in this, wouldn't you agree?
I would not only agree with, I'm kind of tempted to use a little jingle which is used by the company to publicize its friendship. There's a lovely little tune, it's a catchy little tune. I understand it's been written by Amitabh Bhattacharya, and the composer of the tune is Ram Sampath. It goes like this: Jo tera hai wo mera hai, jo tera hai wo mera. And this seems to me symbolizing the relationship between India's biggest telecom company Bharti Airtel and the Department of Telecommunication.
As you know, The license fees are essentially spectrum charges, though we call spectrum charges separately. But most countries give licenses virtually free and charge a very hefty amount for the spectrum, which is a scarce resource. So Bharatis have been getting the scarce resource, and what they're supposed to pay to the people of India for the scarce resource, this is what they're not really paying. That's the sum total of what the Bharatis have done. But what is the redress for the people?
You see, at this particular point of time, I think there should be pressure put by civil society. I think somebody can put in an application under the Right to Information Act to ascertain, to get hold of the copy of this draft report. Questions should be asked of the Department of Telecommunications as to why they haven't replied. I think at the end of the day, what the process is, after the draft report, after the CAG's office receives the replies from the DOT, then it is supposed to prepare a final report. Then that final report is supposed to be presented in Parliament. So, but I think even before that happens, I think there's a lot of public interest involved. Maybe there should be, it could be that since public revenues are involved, since public interest is involved, somebody could move a public interest litigation. So I think at the end of the day, it's not just we are dealing with one company. We are not dealing with a superstar entrepreneur, a man who is the poster boy of Indian capitalism. It's not just the fact that in the year that ended on the 31st of March 2015, according to the balance sheet of the company, Mr. Sunil Bharti Mittal took home an income, an earning of over 27 crores. I mean, if you look at the median income, that's a midpoint. The Bharti group has about 30,000 plus employees, and it's 324 times the median income of these 30,000 plus employees. So I don't grudge Mr. Sunil Bharti Mittal all the money that he's made. The only problem I had, this should not be made. I mean, I forget his personal income. Money that has been made by the company should not have been made at the expense of the people of this country.
Thank you very much, Paranjoy, but we'll come back to you with whatever you write further on this and as the case progresses.
Thank you so much, Prabir, for having me on this program.
This is all we have time for today. Keep watching Newsclick.